11,500 years ago, on a windswept ridge in what is now southeastern Turkey, a group of human beings did something that should not have been possible. They quarried 20-ton limestone pillars from solid bedrock. They carved them with foxes, scorpions, vultures, leopards. They arranged them into circles. And then, when they were finished, they buried the whole thing on purpose. The site is called Göbekli Tepe. And every textbook you read in school about agriculture coming first, then villages, then religion, is wrong. Göbekli Tepe proves we built temples before we built farms. We had gods before we had grain. So the question stops being who built it. The real question is, who buried it? And what were they trying to hide? In 1963, a joint Turkish-American survey rolled across the limestone hills of Şanlıurfa province. They were cataloging Neolithic sites. They came up a hill the locals called Göbekli Tepe, Potbelly Hill, and found a few flint chips and some broken limestone fragments. They wrote it up as a medieval cemetery, maybe Byzantine. Nothing to see here. And for 31 years, nothing was. Then in 1994, a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt rolls up to the same hill. Schmidt is a Neolithic specialist. He has been hunting for the place somewhere in this region where the human story turned a corner. And he sees what nobody else saw. Those broken limestone fragments, they aren't grave markers. They are the tops of pillars. And the hill itself isn't a hill, it is a mound. A man-made mound. Schmidt starts digging. What he finds in the next decade rewrites prehistory. Beneath that hill is a complex of stone enclosures, circles ringed by T-shaped pillars, some of them 5 meters tall, weighing up to 20 tons, and carved into the limestone, bulls, boars, cranes, scorpions, a vulture cradling what looks like a human head. No farming, no pottery, no metal. Just hunter-gatherers and the most sophisticated architecture on Earth. Let's get the date right, because this is where things break. Radiocarbon samples from organic material wedged in the pillar foundations, pollen, charcoal, bone, all converge on a window, roughly 9,500 to 9,000 BCE. That is 11,500 years ago. For comparison, Stonehenge is around 5,000 years old. The Great Pyramid of Giza is about 4,600 years old. Göbekli Tepe is more than twice the age of either of them. This is not a small problem. In 9,500 BCE, the conventional model of human civilization says small bands, maybe 30 people, following game herds, stone tools, skin tents, no agriculture for another 1,500 years, no wheels, no writing, no metallurgy. And yet, somehow, these people decided to organize a labor force of hundreds, possibly thousands, quarry stone with flint hammers, drag 20-ton pillars miles across rough terrain, without roads, without wheels, without draft animals. Why? The standard archaeological answer is religion. These were ritual structures, some kind of shrine. Schmidt himself called it the world's first temple. But here is what Schmidt also said, and what most people miss. He said the religion came first. The temple came first. And then, only then, did people start farming the surrounding hills, settling permanently nearby, inventing the world we live in. Let's stand inside one of these circles. Enclosure D is the best preserved. 12 pillars in a ring, 2 enormous central pillars facing each other, the whole thing roughly 20 meters across. Each pillar is T-shaped, a flat vertical shaft with a horizontal cap. And once you stare at one long enough, you realize these aren't just pillars. They're people. The T-shape is the head and shoulders of a stylized human figure. On many of the pillars, you can see carved arms wrapping around the front, fingers meeting at a stone belt, sometimes a loincloth carved below. They are anthropomorphic. 20-ton stone giants standing in a circle, facing each other. And in the carvings, foxes leap, scorpions skitter, snakes coil down the shafts, a leopard mauls something, a vulture lifts a headless body. Let's pause on the vulture. Because in the region's later Neolithic cultures, particularly Çatalhöyük, 1,000 miles and 1,000 years away, there is a documented funerary tradition. Excarnation. You leave the body of the dead exposed. Vultures strip the flesh. You bury the clean bones. The vulture is a psychopomp, a soul carrier. At Göbekli Tepe, that imagery may be the earliest evidence we have of a belief in an afterlife. 11,000 years ago, before farming. Now here is where the ancient aliens crowd gets loud. And honestly, I get it. Because somebody had to teach these hunter-gatherers how to engineer a T-pillar that won't topple, how to dress limestone with flint, how to align stones to, and this is real, possible astronomical orientations. How did Stone Age nomads learn this? The mainstream answer: trial and error over generations, accumulated craft knowledge, lost predecessors we just haven't found. The fringe answer: somebody or something taught them. In 2017, 2 researchers at the University of Edinburgh published a paper that set the internet on fire. They looked at the carvings on Pillar 43, sometimes called the vulture stone, and they argued the animals depicted on it were not random animals. They were star constellations. And the pattern of constellations shown, it corresponds to the sky over Göbekli Tepe around 10,950 BCE. Now this is contested. Plenty of archaeologists think the constellation reading is a stretch, pattern matching gone wild. But here's why the date matters. Roughly 10,950 BCE is the front edge of a real climatic event called the Younger Dryas, a sudden violent return to Ice Age conditions that lasted about 1,200 years. Temperatures dropped by as much as 10 degrees Celsius in some places, within a single human lifetime, maybe even within a decade. What caused the Younger Dryas? There are 2 main theories. The mainstream one, a massive freshwater outflow from melting North American ice caps into the Atlantic, shutting down ocean circulation. The fringe one, but with real peer-reviewed evidence, a comet or asteroid impact, possibly multiple fragments, striking the ice sheets, igniting fires across continents, briefly turning the sky to ash. Some researchers think Pillar 43 is a memorial to exactly that event. If that is right, then Göbekli Tepe might be the oldest monument to a global catastrophe. Built by survivors, carved by people who remembered, and whose descendants built a temple to make sure nobody forgot. Let's talk about the builders. Because for a long time, the conventional model said hunter-gatherers couldn't build this. You needed the surplus calories of agriculture to free up enough labor for monumental construction. You needed cities, storage, hierarchy. Göbekli Tepe didn't have any of that. No grain, no bread ovens, no fortifications. Just feasting bones. Genuine feasting bones. Tons of them. Gazelle, aurochs, wild boar, wild ass. The estimates suggest that during construction phases, hundreds of people gathered here, sometimes maybe over 1,000, hunted in vast, organized drives, cooked massive feasts, possibly fueled by something like fermented grain mash, the precursor to beer. Yes, beer, maybe, before bread. So picture it. You are a hunter-gatherer in 9,500 BCE. Your band roams a territory the size of a county. You know maybe 40 people in your whole life. And then once a year, or once a season, or once a generation, you walk for days to a hill in the middle of nowhere. You see strangers. You see the great stones. You hunt with people you have never met before. You eat, you drink, and you all together drag another pillar into place. This was not just a temple. This was a cathedral, a trade fair, a genetic exchange, a regional pilgrimage. Modern archaeologists now suspect that Göbekli Tepe, and we should say sites like it because there are at least a dozen related ones in the same region, may be the reason agriculture was invented. You can't feed 1,000 pilgrims with hunting alone. You start kneading. You start planting. Civilization in this model is a byproduct of religion, not the other way around. Now we come to the strangest part. The part that nobody has a satisfying answer for. After around 1,500 years of use, roughly around 8,000 BCE, the builders of Göbekli Tepe deliberately filled in their own temple. We are not guessing. The fill is not natural erosion, it is anthropogenic, meaning people did it on purpose. They brought in thousands of cubic meters of debris, broken flint tools, animal bones, fragments of pillars, gravel, soil. They packed it into every enclosure. They covered every carving. They sealed it. And then they walked away. Why? The honest answer is, we don't know. But the leading theories are unsettling.
Theory 1. Ritual decommissioning. The site had served its purpose. The people closed it the way you close a grave. A burial for a building. Theory 2. Something went wrong. A plague, a drought, a bad omen, a god they no longer trusted.
Theory 3. And this is the one that the ancient aliens crowd loves, but which serious researchers also can't rule out. They buried it to preserve it, to hide it. Maybe from something, maybe for someone. There is precedent for ritual burial in later cultures. The Egyptians sealed tombs. The Maya buried earlier temples beneath new ones. But what is so striking at Göbekli Tepe is that nothing was built on top. No second temple. No replacement. The site was buried and then forgotten for 10,000 years, until Klaus Schmidt walked up that hill. Before we close, let me show you one more thing. On the central pillars of enclosure D, the two largest, the ones facing each other in the middle of the ring, there are carvings of belts. And on those belts, symbols. Hieroglyphic looking, repeating, specific. Are they writing? Mainstream archaeology says no. Writing wasn't invented for another 6,000 years in Mesopotamia, but the symbols at Göbekli Tepe are not decorative scribbles. They appear in patterns. They recur across pillars and across sites. One of those H shapes shows up at 3 different Neolithic temples over a span of hundreds of miles. That is not random. The conservative reading, a shared symbolic language. Not writing, but a system of communicative marks, logos, clan signs, maybe sacred punctuation. The bolder reading, proto-writing, an ideographic system that predates Sumerian cuneiform by 60 centuries. If that is right, we have to redraw the entire timeline of human cognition. Here is what I keep coming back to. 11,500 years ago, a group of human beings, anatomically identical to you and me, same brains, same hands, same hunger for meaning, looked out at a world that had just been broken. The ice was retreating. The mammoths were dying. Familiar herds were vanishing. The old way of life was ending. And so they did the most human thing imaginable. They built a place to gather, to remember, to explain. We don't know if they had gods exactly like ours. We don't know what stories they told around the fires. We don't know what they thought the vultures were carrying away, or why a fox needed to be carved 15 feet high. But we know they cared enough about meaning to organize, to labor, to suffer, to haul 20-ton stones across a wilderness, and then to bury them all again. Göbekli Tepe is not just an archaeological site. It is the oldest surviving evidence that we have always been the kind of species that builds cathedrals before we build kitchens, that asks the big questions first, that makes art in the dark, before history, before farming, before writing, before us. We were already this. If this episode shifted something in your head about who we are, about how old this whole human project really is. There are more places like Göbekli Tepe. Karahan Tepe, just a few kilometers away, maybe even older. Saiburç, Neveli Chori. An entire constellation of sites scattered across what archaeologists now call the Taş Tepeler, the stone hills. We are only at the beginning of understanding what was buried out there. If you want to come along on that journey, subscribe to Before History, because the further back we look, the stranger we get. See you in the next one.